Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Mr. Ian Teaches English. Today is an introduction lesson to modals, which is going to be an ongoing series as I talk about each modal individually. But before we jump in, please consider subscribing, like the videos that are parts of series that you enjoy, and let me know down in the comments what types of videos you would like to see. But that's enough of me talking. Let's jump into the video. All right, let's talk about modals. Now, this is meant to be a very short introduction lesson to modals. I'm going to create a special lesson about each individual modal, so we'll have a chance to go into detail and talk about how each one works. But this is about modals in general. Now, what are they? Three key ideas. Modals are verbs. So if somebody asks, what is this? It is a verb. But they are helping verbs. They must be connected to another verb. They cannot be alone. Modals don't have tenses, number two. So you can't say that a modal is a past tense verb or a future tense verb. It's not. And they don't change. They don't conjugate in the past tense or in the present tense or in the future tense. They have specific definitions that you need to remember. Like past tense verbs, if they're irregular, you just need to memorize them. Phrasal verbs are the same way. You just need to memorize what they mean. And number three, modals have multiple meanings. Be careful. There are some modals that have 4 or 5 different meanings depending on context. For example, could. Sometimes could talks about an ability in the past. Sometimes could talks about a request in the present. And sometimes could talks about a possibility in the future. So be careful. Context is really, really important. All right, so modals, what do they look like? What's the form? There are two types of modals in my experience. The basic modal, which has multiple different definitions, some in the past, some in the present, some in the future, are created using the modal and the base form. So only 2 words create these modal verbs. For example, must have, should go, could be. We have the modal, and then the base form of the verb follows it. There are also past modals. These modals only have past definitions, and they are created using the modal, have, and the past participle. For example, must have had. And yeah, that sounds a little weird with 2 of the same verb, but it follows the rules. Another example, should have gone or could have been. And you'll see my examples for the basic modals and the past tense modals are the same, just in those different formats. Now, what are modals? Here is a list of the most common modals. Can, could, may, might, must, have to, need to, have got to, had better, would, ought to, should, and be supposed to. Now, will works like a modal. It follows the rules of a modal, but since we use it to create the future tense, it's not technically a modal. So I am not going to talk about will, just use it to create the future tense. Now be careful. Some of these modals include the word to, like have to, need to, have got to, ought to, be supposed to. If the modal includes to, then use to. But if it doesn't include to, then don't. Remember, it's modal and then the base verb. So it's not can to go, it's can go. It's not must to go, it's must go. But ought to has the word to. So we say ought to go. All right. Make sure that when you are using the modals, if it doesn't have to, if the modal doesn't have to, then don't use a to. If it does, make sure you do. Also, a little pronunciation. The to is usually pronounced ta. So I've got to, have to, need to, ought to. And also, if you want to sound American, that to is really softened. So we'll say have to, need to, have got to, oughta, be supposed to. It's a lot softer in American English. Now, again, this is just an introduction. I'm going to talk about each of these individual modals in their own video, but why are modals important? Modals are extremely important. When I teach modals in my class, I tell my students that this is the most important thing that you will learn this term. Knowing these modal definitions help you understand the nuances or the small changes in English. If somebody says you should go to the doctor or you could go to the doctor, those are very different words or very different ideas. So, knowing what they are will help you understand what your English speakers are trying to say to you. Also, in using these, if you are using these wrong, it will cause confusion. If you say you should go to the doctor, but that's not really what you mean, you're using the wrong modal, it can cause a lot of confusion. So, pay attention to these, note the differences. We're going to talk about them individually, so come back and we'll do that. Thank you so much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget, this is the beginning of a series where we will talk about the definitions of all of the modals so you can be confident in hearing them, understanding them, and using them. So go ahead, if you have a question, put it in the comments below. Let me know if there is something that you want me to talk about, or just let me know the videos you enjoy. So for now, have a lovely day. We'll see you next time.